listeners. Welcome to the Lone Screenplay Nominee Podcast, where we talk about films that were solely nominated for an Oscar in the writing categories. I'm your host, Matthew Anderson, and today we have Christina Jeurling Birro back on the show. Welcome back to the podcast, Christina. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm excited. I'm doing well and excited to talk about the movie.
Yeah, it's been a while since we had you back on. I believe it was for When Harry Met Sally, which was uh,
Another good one.
oh that was a surprisingly good one. Yeah, so I guess just yeah, instead of just going through the typical questions I usually ask my new guests coming on board, and now that you're appearing on the show, this is now your second time. I might as well just ask a different question and just make it connected to our film we're going to talk about, which is In the Loop. If you guys aren't aware, we are talking about that. We're not talking about, I don't know, the substance or, is it really, are they going to talk about something else, or maybe they'll jump back to When Harry Met Sally. No, 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 no. We're going to talk about In the Loop. But
We can
before
talk
we
about the
do,
substance too, though.
another time. But before we talk about In the Loop, the one question I want to ask in relation to our discussion which may be a bit of a broader question or maybe a bit trickier to answer for you. I don't know. What are some of your favorite satirical films? They could be political satire. They could be satire on Hollywood. Do you have some of your favorites that you could think of?
Well, in terms of In the Loop that we're talking about, I have to say that the Armando Iannucci universe, if you want to call it that, is certainly one of my favorites. I mean, you have this movie, which is based off of a series called In the Thick, which is certainly political satire, and he influenced a whole bunch of people from Sacha Baron Cohen to Ricky Gervais. And in this universe, of course, became Veep in 2012. You have writers like Jesse Armstrong, who were part of this movie, Georgia Pritchett, who went to Veep, who I've had on my show, who wrote for Succession, Toby Roche, and of course, the gold standard, which isn't satire, but Succession in terms of that you can really smell Succession on In the Loop. So he's certainly someone who has influenced so many and gone so far in this type of um, satire that certainly one of my favorites. What about
Nice.
you?
Um, yeah, just to name a few in terms of like movies, because I unfortunately don't have the luxury and time to sit down and watch some of these great shows like The Thick of It, which is something that I didn't even know existed until I was doing research on the movie here. And even Veep is one that I've seen clips of on Twitter, and some of them are very very funny.
Well,
Uh,
one day if you have time, Veep is so, I mean, just once in a while, if you're just like looking for something that'll make your day, go check out a couple episodes of Veep.
Yeah, I'll do my best. As far as like satirical films of themselves, I guess well, a couple of them I'll mention. One is Birdman, which I guess that does technically count as like a satire because it is making fun of the Broadway show and such. I remembered really liking RoboCop a lot. That was like another like satirical movie, which unfortunately in some cases is coming true with how our world's changing for better or for worse. And I'm just looking through here. And Ace in the Hole I remembered was
Oh,
one
Ace
that
in the
I
Hole. Billy Wilder is absolutely one of it, who I think is a huge influence on Yanucci as well. So yeah.
yeah, and Ace in the Hole is one that I've already covered on the podcast before, which is a pretty damn good movie, I must say. That was like, I think that was one of the first Billy Wilder films I'd seen of his, but yeah, it's really good. But yeah, we
Oh,
did a
that's a
whole
classic.
yeah, and anyone who's interested in knowing my full thoughts on it, you can go ahead and check out that episode. But yeah, I had a great time talking about it. But yeah, there's a couple others I could mention. Brazil was pretty interesting for what it was. You know,
I wasn't a big fan of Don't Look Up, but there were certain parts of it that were really good.
I actually forgot that existed. Yeah. And then what else was there? I
So,
guess like I guess we could technically count it as like satire. Fight Club would be another one. I guess. But you know, yeah, there's still a lot of really good satirical movie, films that are, satires and such, and there's a lot of really good ones out there that I would recommend, and those are we've already mentioned a handful already.
Doctor
So
Strangelove, I don't know if
yes,
that's by the loop, of course, but that's like the ultimate one. You have the great dictator, Charlie Chaplin.
oh
There's
yeah,
certainly so many to mention.
I think I already mentioned Death of Stalin was another one,
Hmm.
if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, okay. Um, so yeah, just a lot of really good satirical movies to get caught
And
up
it
on.
feels timely at the moment, also in our political
Oh yeah,
situation, to be watching these. It's interesting how timely in the loop still feels now. And I did a rewatch.
yeah, yeah. We'll definitely discuss some of those in just a moment. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That was the only question I had. So without further ado, we can just get into our discussion for
Have
In
you
the Loop.
seen Succession? I was just wondering if that's one of the ones.
I have not. I've seen some clips of it. I am aware of somewhat of what happens in the
There may
final
be a few
season.
things I'll refer to here and there because I can really feel the impact that Yanucci had, and Jesse Armstrong, of course, coming from this as the writer from In the Loop to that.
Right. Okay. All right. Yeah. Perfect. All right. Yeah. So, like I said, we're just gonna jump right into our discussion for In the Loop, from which is a film from 2009. This won't be a beat by beat bulletin presentation like you hear on other channels, but we will be discussing major spoilers for our talk. If you haven't seen the film yet and want to hear our full thoughts on it, watch the film and then come back to hear us talk about it. Uh, so as far as our production notes on this, filmmaker Armando Iannucci reteamed with his TV writers from The Thick of It, as you'd mentioned, and all worked on a portion of the script. When they were done, they sent their drafts in to Armando for approval, and then he'd write his own take on it, uh, which is a similar writing structure that they did for The Thick of It when they did their first two. I guess they call them series, but not in the UK. It's series, but it's
Yes, there's a
starts with
season.
seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I very weird, but whatever. So filming took place from May to December of 2008 within London, Washington D.C., and New York, and the film had its world premiere in January 2009 at the Sundance Film Festival. Outside of its lone adapted screenplay nod at the Oscars, it had been nominated for 2 BAFTAs and got many critics groups rallying for it, including its 2 nominations the film had received at both the LA and New York Film Critics for its writing and supporting performance by Peter Capaldi. After the film was done, Armando went on to direct another political satire, Death of Stalin, which we've already mentioned, and as you said, kept writing and directing for television, such as working on the Emmy-winning show Veep. His time was from sorry,
2012. Oh,
2012.
bless
Yep,
you.
yeah. Sorry. I still have a little bit of a sickness with me, but I'm good for now. So yeah,
You're
from
doing
2012.
strong. You're doing very
Yeah,
well to be here when you're sick.
yeah. I'm doing everything I can. I got my water here with me, so I'll be good. So yeah, he worked on the show Veep from 2012 to 2015. And as far as like the log line for the film, a group of skeptical American and British operatives attempting to prevent a war between two countries. And after one of the British ministers, was it, messes up during a radio interview. So
Well, not sure they want to prevent it. The U.S. president and prime minister, they kind of fancy a war.
that's true. Yeah. So while I take a glass of water, I want to ask you, Christina, what were your initial thoughts on it? And obviously, it sounds like you've seen it before. It sounds like you've seen this before. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, well, I saw it way back when, and then I rewatched it quite recently. And no, I love it. Again, I'm in on Yanucci and that whole universe's style. And this one is so interesting in I the fact that it feels so handheld, documentary style. There's a lot of improv in it. Um, One of the things you were mentioning before, but one of the main references that he has that I've heard him talk about a lot is screwball comedy, and he really looks at screwball comedy in his directing style and in his writing style, and it works so well in this film because you have an immense amount of characters just walking in and out of the scene and in different places. And it just feels like there's an energy, and you need to watch it several times, I think, in order to catch some of the amazing lines and cultural differences that they're working with between the American and British. And so I really enjoy it. And again, it feels super timely.
It definitely does feel super timely, especially with how they treat everyone like idiots in the on both sides. And there's even that comment that they make about what was it? Peter Capaldi had a meeting with one of the U.S. government officials, but it was with like a 22-year-old, and the way that I can't remember the actor's name, but he talks with the one American in his like private office or whatever, and he's like, I just had a discussion with a young boy. And he's like, oh yeah, bright kid, yeah, he's got a great future ahead of him, and it's just so funny that it's like you can kind of chalk it up to now with some of our politics or even in other countries'
Yeah.
politics of how they
No, but
treat
the
younger people.
character that David Rash plays, I think he's the Assistant Secretary of State, who
Yeah.
I know the they built a lot upon. They looked a lot on at Rumsfeld, creating the sort of
Okay.
neocon character in the research before, and he also has a line that feels very timely the about truth and facts and the facts in general, and that the man with one fact is king, and it just feels like very much it's interesting and kind of depressing how timely it is. And another thing that I think that is interesting that Yanucci very much always focuses on, or has seemed to, is sort of mid-level politics, the sort of mid-level bosses, so to speak. We don't actually see the U.S. president or the British prime minister. We're sort of mid-level, and seeing how people will change sides, how they'll things that will happen that really affect world politics on that level, which makes it really interesting.
Yeah, and it does an interesting like especially in the last half hour for me is where I found it to be very interesting and a bit compelling in terms of how they were cobbling up everything together so that way they can get what they want. All these characters get what they
And who
want.
takes the blame, right?
Yeah, exactly. Who
Ultimately.
takes? Yeah, and they're like, the oh god, who's the actor's name? Tom Hollander, who plays Simon Foster,
Foster, yeah, the meat puppet.
and it was yeah. He's the one who screws up the radio interview where he's like, war is I think it was like inevitable or something,
For
and
peace, you need to climb the mountain of conflict,
yeah, yeah,
and which becomes misconstrued as that we're all going to war now.
yeah. Which I just find that so funny to where he's like, and then right after the interview, right after that other interview he does outside, he's in the car, he has his head down, his hands over his head, he's like, oh my god, what did I do? Like, how could I screw this up even more? I thought that was like really funny. But it was great when he said in like he even with like in the limo conversation when they have on their way over to the UN. He just makes it like a passing reference to his new guy, and I can't remember the woman's name who was with them in the car. Was it Judy? Judy
Right, right.
Molly, where he says like he's thinking about retiring, and then once they land in the UN, and it's now all over the news where it's like, oh yeah, like the meat puppet is considered retiring, and it's like, what? No, I never. That was just like a joke I made. I didn't actually think that would be like published that quickly. Um, yeah. But there's other gags in the film I actually thought was funny. One that I thought was very, very funny for me was when Gandolfini arrives at the American consulate, I think, or he arrives at the offices, and he's asking like, where the hell is the guy I'm supposed to have a meeting with? He stood me up for however long, and he's like, oh yeah, he's in a meeting, but in reality, he went to go play. I think it was like tennis, and
Hmm.
then you see one of the guys who's from The Office. I can't remember the actor's name, but you see him in the little office space with his racket and his bag, and he's like, what is he going with him? What is he going to racket with this guy? It's like, no. He's just no. He always brings his bag in, hoping that the boss would pick him for racket day. And I thought that was so funny. He has this like shit eating grin, the guy does, and I thought that was funny. So,
No, it's interesting. I've heard Iannucci talk about the research that many of the actors did for this. Like Gandolfini, he actually went to the Pentagon and tried to sort of hang out and see how they talked, and as well as the Capaldi character, who I mean is one of the he swears more than anyone in a
yeah.
lot of ways, which is one of those things you can see that they carried over to Succession. You must have heard all the fuck yous that
Oh yeah.
we have
Oh,
Logan
definitely.
Roy
Yeah.
saying, and it's certainly something that Malcolm, the character Peter Capaldi, which he Yanucci has said is based on someone who worked high office in the UK. Um, and those things that they actually did look into the differences between the people around surrounding the American politicians and the people surrounding the UK politicians, and they actually did do quite a bit of research.
Yeah, and that's something I think a really good satirical film should do, especially when you're focusing on politics, is you want to do your research to where you're able to, get the audience in the mind frame of where the political powers are within said time period, and you're also making sure that you're doing it so that whenever you do make a joke, or if you may have your actors make jokes, they're within the time of said relevance. So like for this case, it's set during like what 2008, 2009, around that time, which is yeah, it satirizes the British American politics, in particular of that of like the invasion of Iraq.
Exactly,
Um,
which is not mentioned exactly what it is, but it's you can sort of feel it.
you could fill in the blanks, especially with again with everything is recorded. Even with some of the references they make, with like there were a lot of like Harry Potter references, and I'm like, I keep forget like I that was even though it was a franchise that I grew up watching as a kid, I was like, oh yeah, this did come out right as like Half Blood Prince was coming out in theaters at
There's
that
so
summer, I
many
think.
pop cultural references that I had forgotten about. They reference Buffy, I
Yep.
Heart Huckabees. There's all this stuff that's just thrown into the dialogue, as you would with your colleagues. What are you watching now? And
Yeah, and even with the idea of like what are you, Spartacus? Of like
yeah,
trying to defend me when you really didn't send out the text. I that printer scene was also pretty funny too, or not the printer, the fax scene with the guy where he's like, did you send out the pip was it pip whip or whatever it was, and he's like, well, if you did, then this is what your career would be, and then he just smashes it.
smashes it.
He's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's like, let's double check with the printer if you have any chance of keeping your job, and he's like, stepping on it, whatever. He's like, oh, I guess not. Or whatever. There were just so many jokes in this that I was like, I wish I had time to rewatch it and be like, let me write down some of these jokes here.
Exactly. They're a mile a minute. I mean, that's the thing. Then when you go back, you have to listen. Another thing that I think is, if I can indulge me in another Succession
Yeah, go
reference,
ahead.
he has a way, or Jesse Armstrong in that case has a way of sort of showing um, something very important happening in a place that doesn't seem very important. Remember the scene in this film where Gandolfini and they go into the kids' room and they're actually using a kid's toy to calculate
Yes.
really important data. There's
Yeah.
a really important scene in Succession where the four siblings end up in like a kids' room to talk about some of the most, you know, emotional and harsh things that are going on in the family, and they're all sort of round in this room, which I felt was very much taken from there. And it gives that this importance that he's counting the amount of troops and that can go to war in on this little machine that's actually a child's machine, just gives it an air of who's actually running the world, and is
Yeah.
anyone taking anything seriously.
And it was funny how he said like what it takes to here's the number that we have of troops ready to on standby for war. 12? Yeah, 12. Well, yeah, of course 12. What do you think? He's like, no, 12,000. And he's like, how much would it be to win the war? Well, it would be a lot more. Well, we'd have to do a lot more because that's probably the minimum you're going to get of people dying in the war. Because and Gandolfini makes like a comment of like a wise remark of like, in order to win the war, you have to make, you have to have a certain amount of people left to say like, oh yeah, we actually won the war and such.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that was like, wow, that's kind of dark, but a little funny. And again, it's all, as you said, in the little kids' room and with the kid's toy, making the calculations, and it makes the toy sound every time you hit a button and whatnot. So that
And
was
that's kind
funny.
of the same idea as the ending in general, that it's this wall that really is Simon Foster's fall,
Yeah.
this garden wall or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, where we see who was the actor from that? Oh God, he was so
Kapal
familiar.
Coogan.
Steve Coogan. Yes,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, he makes a comment about the wall falling apart and such out in the garden. Um, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it is kind of this. Yeah, that is tying very much into the movie and its politics. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there were any other comments because I have a couple other notes. Oh, you know what I thought was funny was CNN Cartoon Network News. I thought that was like I think it was, oh God, it was someone had made that comment in the movie, and I thought that's pretty funny. And then it was even great when we find out that Peter Capaldi, who joins the Tom Hollander and the new intern guy at the hotel, and then he walks into the room, and Tom Hollander's like, "Oh, what if you? Oh, what? You're making fun of me now in a different time zone."
Yeah.
I thought that was great, and then even Peter Capaldi is sitting over Tom Hollander's bed, and here Tom Hollander's like, "I just want to go to sleep," and he's like, he's like, "No, we're staying up the entire night until you practice of saying nothing to anyone."
Hmm.
I thought that was particularly really funny.
I mean, there's so
Um,
many good lines. I mean, the Canadians are just happy to be here when they have this
yeah,
meeting, and
yeah,
and I mean that's the thing, that it's like really one has to see it a lot of, and that's the same in Veep, and of course you know that there's so many actors. I mean, Anna Klumsky, who plays Liza, she went on to Veep, as did several other actors. Went on to a lot of different series. So, and a lot of them come from improv too. And that's a way that he actually films. You know, he'll let them sort of work in 360, put cameras everywhere and just go crazy, so they don't have to worry about, dialogue and things like that. And that's what brings all these fabulous lines that you're referring to.
yeah. And again, it works really really well in the context of like if if you're able as a writer, if you're able to set up the political angle well enough to where the audience understands what's going on enough to where even if they're not that to attune or that in love with what's going on politically, they could at least be like, all right, I get the time period, I know where we are generally speaking. And that's really where the jokes come in. I would assume that's where the jokes would come in pretty well, where whether it's through like really great improvisations. Like I think Capaldi when him and Gandolfini have a conversation with each other, Gandolfini had said like a really funny, comeback to him, to where or it was something I can't remember the full story, but essentially like Capaldi said after a take, he's like, all right, I like, what's a really good comeback I can make for this Gandolfini character, and then they were like, boom, got one, we got one right on the cuff, and yeah, it works well.
And
Another
it's not just the political, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, it's not just the political humor that's so great. I mean, it's also kind of office humor and power plays between the assistants who are always cutting each other down. And it can be, you can, even if you don't know exactly what references they're making in terms of the politics, you get in terms of just the power play between all these people and the cultural differences.
Yeah, and in terms of like the other, some very like, technical aspects, or at least one that I thought was very appreciative, was the different color tones that they have between England, between UK and the United States, and it was
Good
nice
point.
that
Yeah.
they had a different set of like color tones for the, not just within the office environment, but even with how they were shot and lit, and it's something that I liked. It makes them stand out a bit more, because nowadays whenever you have some of these more modern films, even some of the bigger budget ones, they're like, shoot it exactly like we would like the other location, no one's gonna really know the difference. And it's like, no, that's one way of making your movie stand out in a very small way, but the little details add up to a lot when you get to the end of the day. The one other funny gag I thought was great was, and this is all about the whole power struggles within the office and such. Was when Peter Capaldi tells, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was telling the one guy about how, I need you to move your voting up from like what was it, like 1:30 to 11 o'clock, and then he goes in and then makes an embarrassment of himself, and he's like, all right, by the way, Malcolm, I got your vote meet up. Oh really, you gotta you gotta straighten out. Good, perfect, now I need you to go back to 2 o'clock. He's like, no, I can't do that. I've already made a fool out of myself. And then immediately you cut to the next scene, and you see him just walking, and it's like, so, and then just cut, and then just we just cut away from that, assuming like, okay, we kind of insinuate what happened there. But I thought that was pretty funny, even with the idea of like them using the leaked documents and cutting out like the footnotes, and then cutting out like a whole chunk of page to be like, here's why we should be going to war. And I thought that was all funny. And even the guy is like, I don't want to do this. He's like, oh yeah, no, he's having a bit of a hard time. And he just grabs his finger. He's like, and click, scroll down, delete. There, we got it fixed. And then he just sent forward him the copy, and I thought that was so funny. Again, very, very, kind of depressing, but at the same time, it's like I kind of like this kind of brand of humor from Iannucci, which is fun. It's funny because while I was watching it in the moment, it was kind of the same feeling I had with Death of Stalin, where it's like, because I that one I actually did watch beforehand, and I saw that like about a year or two ago. I saw that, and it seems like within the moment, it's kind of hard to be like, what are some jokes here that I'm laughing at really, really hard, and what are some jokes I'm supposed to be not laughing at, but more, paying attention and being serious about. But once you finish the movie, you look back at all these things, you're like, oh yeah, that actually was a lot funnier than I had remembered, or oh yeah, that is, kind of weirdly sick of them to do, and I didn't realize it at the moment while I was laughing hysterically at it. And I
Well,
think
that's
that,
the brilliance in all of that work and all of his collaborators' work is how they put humor and satire in some of the most depressing and important things we're going through,
yeah,
be it in the high economic world of Succession, or in the vice president's office in Veep, or in that's the genius of it.
yeah.
I think it's very, very British. Were you ever a fan of Monty Python?
Funny enough, I've never seen Monty Python. I will get around to it down the road.
They were also very good. I'm wondering how much it'd be interesting to talk to Yanucci about sort of Monty Python and their incredibly good comedy on that sort of mid-level political bureaucratic figure that they did a lot of sketches on that I think the British in particular are really, really good at.
Yeah, and one thing I also have to comment on the movie for, and something that I didn't. Again, it was just again, it's something that I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. Malcolm Tucker is the only character from the thick of it, and the fact that I was able to get into this world without having to watch the first two seasons of that show made me realize, oh, okay, wow, that's actually pretty interesting. That I didn't really need to know much about Malcolm Tucker and who he was. All I know is that like yeah, it's this guy who's swearing up a storm and he's always getting pissed off at everyone for doing something so small and minor. But yeah, no, it's pretty good how good of a writer how good these writers are being able to set up the characters instantly from the beginning, establish who they are. And I loved also too that we started the conflict like literally like we weren't even 5 minutes into the movie, and they
Right.
start the whole conflict of like war is inevitable, and then he's
Incredibly
like
paced. It's
yeah, he's like
just really,
yeah, he's like, wait, did he just say that on the air? He can't say that, And then he's like, he has this, phone conversation, and he's walking all the way to the office. And the other comment I did want to make, going back to some of the references, I cracked up so hard with when he called the new intern guy Ron Weasley. I thought that was so
yeah.
funny
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh my god, that is hilarious.
Mm.
But yeah, no, it just again, it adds back into just how good of a script this is personally.
It really is. It really is tight and fast paced and funny and lots of depth in there that you don't even catch the first time around.
Yeah, you really don't. And the other thing I like too is that they, the whole the intern had cheated on his girlfriend with some American woman, and I thought it was really funny, not really funny, but I liked how they just didn't, they're like, all right, let's prolong this out, but it's like, immediately once he comes back, she knows that he
Hmm.
cheated on her, and he ends up going to his flat to grab some of his things and get out of the house. And I thought that was good. Again, it was just like a typical thing that a lesser writer would be like, all right, let's focus, hammer this in. Like, will she find out? Will she not? And then she does instantly. I'm like, okay, cool. And then we move on from that. So that was good. And yeah, Peter Capaldi is like, out of all the actors in the film, I thought Peter Capaldi was like one of the few characters for me that I thought was very interesting and entertaining from start to finish. Like whatever situations he got himself in were so funny, especially when he's on the phone and he's swearing up a storm, and he's outside the U.S. Capitol. It was like, I think it was the White House he's in front of, and you see the bystander passing by. He's like, "Hey man, can you stop the swearing? There's kids around." And he's like, "Oh, I could care less what you think." And he just runs away, and that was so funny.
Well, I
Just
think
things
they're
like that.
all good. I mean, David Rash, who plays Linton again, I think he's amazing. He
Oh
really
yeah,
is doing he's just a worm.
yeah.
Anna Klumsky, and not to mention Tom Hollander as Simon Foster, who I think is just does an excellent job in this role where he keeps making mistakes and keep trying to save it. And
Yeah, he's even at that one cabinet meeting where he's like, I feel like, they're
we have to
mentioning me
say
now.
something now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like if I don't say anything now, then it will be then the
And he's
moment will be
there just to
gone.
be the meat puppet. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, just they're like, no, dude, you should shut up, okay? You're gonna make it worse, and he
You're just
makes it
filling a
worse.
space. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I thought that was so funny. Yeah, and obviously the late James Gandolfini, who was very good in the movie.
And
Um,
Karen Clark is her name, who plays Mimi, right? The one
uh,
whose teeth are always bleeding.
Mimi Kennedy. Oh yeah, I forgot about
She's
that. Yeah,
excellent. She's excellent.
yeah. No, she was great. Yeah, just a lot of like really good actors in here. Um, and yeah, it's just a very funny movie that I would definitely recommend for everyone to watch for sure.
Me too.
And yeah, and as you said, it very much fits. Ironically or unironically, it fits within our local political landscape we're kind of in now a bit, which is kind of sad. But you know what? It's very funny.
Yeah.
It's one that I'm like, it just shows you how talented of a writer Armando Iannucci is, and his other crew as well. So
And
yeah,
also how depressingly nothing changes.
yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, so yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I don't really have anything else to add about the movie itself. I guess we could just get into our other discussion for some of the other Oscar, potential for this or whatever you call it. But I want to ask actually if you thought, well, first off, I want to ask if you thought this was warranting of its lone adapted screenplay nod, and would you have nominated it for anything else at the Oscars?
Well, definitely it was worthy of the um, screenwriting nod. It's an amazing screenplay. I think it's a incredible directorial feat too, considering the amount of the pacing, the amount of actors, what it lets them do. So I'm having a hard time singling out which actors I would actually nominate for, but Peter Capaldi certainly. Um, which year was this? Who was he up against? Can you see?
So this was the year that Christoph Waltz won for Inglorious
Hmm.
Bastards, and he was up
Well,
against
we're not changing that.
no, 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 we're not. He was up against Matt Damon for Invictus, Woody Harrelson for The Messenger, Christopher Plummer, The Last Station, and Stanley Tucci for The Lovely Bones. I'm pretty sure Capaldi was put in supporting, because it might have been treated more as an ensemble. So
Oh
maybe
yeah, I
that's
think
why
so.
he got the supporting, mentions. So, but yeah, it's a stacked lineup. Uh, Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen the only other film I'd seen from that supporting lineup was The Lovely Bones and Inglorious Bastards, but I haven't seen the others. I haven't seen The Last Station, The Messenger, or Invictus, so I wouldn't really know whether or not they were, if Peter Capaldi deserved to get in that field to begin with
How do you
or
feel
not.
about directing? Would you have put him in
Um,
there?
I mean, it's a good feat of directing for sure from Iannucci, but I feel like his strengths really came from the screenplay itself for
It's
me.
the writing, yeah.
Yeah,
Me too. Yeah.
yeah, it's a competently made movie, and it's not poorly made. In fact, it does a couple things here and there that I thought, oh wow, you actually did better than like an average Joe Schmo director you'd have. But at the same time, I wouldn't really put him in that field. Um, yeah, I don't know. If anything, there's another adapted screenplay nod that I'm not really the biggest fan of personally. That I never really got the hype behind it, and no, it wasn't Precious because I actually haven't seen that yet. It's weirdly enough District 9. I'm not really the biggest fan of that movie at
Oh,
all, and
really?
I just it's doing something that it's doing a lot of things that a lot of people were praising for what it did, especially with having this like office like mockumentary to it, and diving into this like alien culture that are treated more as like uh immigrants, and it's not really done in a very interesting way. Like the story that they presented to me, I thought, yeah, it's just not that compelling of a story. Like I like the father son dynamic with the aliens. I thought that was kind of cool, and some of the action in the finale was kind of interesting. But outside of that, I didn't really care much for District 9 personally. But I get why it was such like a big cultural impact, because even my cousin, he went to Comic-Con at the time, and he saw how they were promoting the hell out of District 9 all summer. In fact, I kept getting trailers for that in front of stuff like, I think it was like Transformers, Hancock, or whatever movies came out that summer. But it was a lot, and I was like, oh, okay, huh, that's interesting. And then I finally saw it years later, and I was like, oh, okay, um,
Well, there we have another satire. We to
yeah,
round out the what
yeah,
we
it's another,
started talking about.
it's another satire. And you know what the funny thing is, I'm noticing about these films just now is that the Academy really likes nominating satirical films. Even if they're not up for like acting nods, they'll nominate them in the screenplay categories. Like we saw, I already mentioned Ace in the Hole was one. The Lobster is another satire in of itself. And yeah, and in the Loop. But yeah. So like I said, adapted screenplay, I would say it's deserving of that nomination for sure. And um, yeah, maybe would
Me
have
too.
found some room for Peter Capaldi for a possible nomination. Yeah, I don't really have much else for other nominations. Yeah, because it's kind of hard for me to say like, oh yeah, a movie was deserving of oh, was it actually deserving of said nod when I haven't like I didn't get a chance to see the said movie. But yeah, I'm just looking through. Yeah, I just don't have much else, honestly, for like other nominations. But I will say it was pretty interesting that they. I'm just looking through the list here. They managed to get up in the air was the other one for adapted screenplay and an education. Have you seen an education yet?
Hmm.
Okay. What was it any good out of curiosity?
Oh, so long ago. I think absolutely was deserving.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I'll have to revisit this year down the road because I'm still curious about seeing Crazy Heart. I've never got a chance to see it all the way through.
Oh, I loved Crazy Art.
And I remember that was like a big year for Jeff Bridges where it was like he's gonna this is gonna be his time. He's got it in the
Hmm.
bag.
Hmm.
No one's gonna beat him. Um, and then yeah, so I'm curious to explore come back to this year down the road, if nothing else, to finally see Precious because I remember that was kind of a big
Oh,
surprise
you have to
for
see
adapted
Precious, yeah.
screenplay. Yeah, it was, and I remember it was a big surprise because Up in the Air I think had won all of the, if not most, of the televised awards. It won like Golden Globe, Critics' Choice. It was like WGA and BAFTA, and then they just didn't go for it for adapted screenplay. They went for Precious, which even Jeffrey Fletcher was like beyond shocked that he won. Um, so yeah,
But it is
um,
a really powerful screenplay and a lead role or lead acting performance in that movie. It's very undeniable.
Gabri Sidibe.
Sid Bay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear she's great. Again, it's a matter of timing. I
Hmm.
just gotta
It
I gotta
always
find
is.
yeah, I gotta find a way to get caught up on some of these films. I'm trying to get caught up on even just the current Oscar stuff right now with everything that's going on. But I'll uh, I'll see what I could do over the next coming weeks. But um, yeah, it's gonna be a bit of a shorter episode, guys. Partly because I'm still feeling a little under the weather, but also just I didn't really have a
You
whole
did a
lot to
good
add.
job coming up
Yeah, I did.
still fit.
Yeah, it's a good thing I had a glass of water here. Otherwise, I don't think I would be able to make it through most of it. But no, I think that's pretty much it for our episode for this. Unless there's anything else you want to add for the movie or
Well,
any of
thank
its
you for
Oscar
having me
nominations.
on
Okay,
again.
yeah, sure, yeah, anytime. And so yeah, so as I always say, I'll just end on this note and say thank you again for dedicating your time to be on the show. Before we sign off, is there anything you'd like to plug in to where listeners can follow you along, Christina?
Well, you can listen to my interviews on my show called Pop Culture Confidential, where I have a bunch of interviews with actors, writers, directors, and other journalists and professionals about TV and film. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Christina Birro, Birro.
Nice. um, and you can follow me and the show through Linktree under at Matthew995, where you could follow along on all my social media accounts such as Twitter and Letterboxd. On the same site, I provide a link for where you can listen to more episodes of the show. And if you're interested in being in the hot seat next year, let me know, and hopefully we can arrange that happening soon. Once again, I want to remind everyone that we've already announced this on our previous episode. When we come back for the show, which will probably be in like end of January ish, early February, we will be covering uh, Almost Famous for our
Ooh,
lone
fun one.
screenplay winning, miniseries podcast. And we'll be covering a couple of other lone screenplay winners down the road. We've already got another one lined up after that to do. Christina, if you're interested in doing another one down the road, I know you have a really busy schedule, so whenever you're able to come back on and do another one
Reach out
for the
anytime,
show,
I'm sure.
awesome. But yeah, we'll talk more about that after the show. Other than that, yeah, that's pretty much it. We hope everyone has a wonderful, remaining 2024. And in the meantime, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and we hope to see you at the movies. Take care, guys.